4 months after my ex-wife had her affair partner's baby, my former mother-in-law showed up at my condo in Beltline with a casserole dish, covered in tinfoil, and eyes that had been crying recently enough that the puffiness hadn't fully gone down. She looked like she'd driven from Airdrie in the rain. Which she probably had. It was March in Calgary. And March in Calgary doesn't care what you're going through. I had just gotten home from a site meeting in Okotoks. My hard hat was still in my hand. My boots were caked in mud from the perimeter walk. I was deciding between reheating leftover butter chicken or just eating crackers and calling it character building. Then I opened the door and there she was. My former mother-in-law. A woman who had known for almost 8 months that my wife was sleeping with my former best friend. Cuff. A woman who had sat across from me at Christmas dinner while all of that was happening and asked me if I wanted more roasted potatoes. The woman who cried at my wedding. The woman who, 6 weeks before everything fell apart, sent me an unsolicited article about investing in RRSPs because she wanted me to have a secure future. She was standing at my door with a casserole. That was not a good sign. I made a shepherd's pie, she said, like we were still family, like time had done something other than what it had actually done. I looked at the dish, then at her. I can see that. She pressed her lips together. Can I come in? Just for a few minutes. I should have said no. My therapist. And yes, I'd started seeing one, because apparently what happened to me qualified as a significant life event. Had been very clear about something she called protecting your recovery space. Which basically meant you don't have to let people walk back into your home just because they used to belong there. But my former mother-in-law wasn't a bad person. That was the complicated part. She wasn't malicious. She was just one of those people who believed that if she fed enough people enough food, the worst problems would eventually become manageable. It had worked for 30 years. This was just the year it stopped. I stepped back and let her in. She walked through my condo slowly. I'd moved in 7 months ago, right after the separation became official. It wasn't the house we'd bought together in Tuscany that was being sold, the proceeds split. This was a 1-bedroom on the 14th floor, with a view of the Bow River when the weather was clear, which in Calgary means maybe 40% of the time. I had a decent couch. A coffee table with a water ring I kept meaning to fix. A single fern that had somehow survived my indifference, which I considered a personal victory. She set the casserole on the kitchen counter, looked around, said nothing for a moment. You seem to be doing all right, she said, and she didn't sound happy about it. I'm working on it. She sat down at the kitchen table. I stayed standing near the island. I wanted to talk to you about the baby, she said. The baby. My ex-wife had sent me a photo through her sister 4 months ago. A newborn, tiny hands, wrapped in a yellow blanket. Innocent, complete, profoundly innocent. I hadn't hated that baby. I'd never been capable of hating that baby. What I hated was the story that had been built around him before he was even born. The story where I was supposed to be a character without ever being asked. What about him? I said. My former mother-in-law folded her hands on the table. Your former best friend is not stepping up. I almost laughed. Of course that's where she started. Not my daughter made terrible choices. Not we owe you an apology we've never properly given. My former best friend. Always the third party. Always the one the framing happened around. Is that surprising to either of you? I asked. She winced. He was supposed to take some parental leave. He didn't. He's been covering for colleagues at work instead. He shows up on weekends sometimes, but never for the hard parts. He's never done a night feeding. He was there for the first few days, then started saying he needed time to adjust. I said nothing. So. She's exhausted, she continued. The baby has reflux, she's barely sleeping. I go over when I can, but I live 40 minutes away and I work 4 days a week. That sounds incredibly hard, I said. I mean that sincerely. Reflux is brutal for everyone involved. My former mother-in-law looked up quickly, hopeful. Then I said, I'm still not sure why you're in my condo. Her face shifted. She reached across the table for the right words and came up empty. Then she said something so precisely chosen it had to have been rehearsed in the car. You were always so steady. Everyone in the family said so. She needs someone steady right now. There it was. Steady. Steady meant I had a good credit score and didn't raise my voice in traffic. Steady meant I showed up on time and sent thank you messages after dinner parties and never made any situation worse by being in it. Steady, in this family had always meant he will absorb whatever we can't handle because he doesn't collapse. Steady had apparently survived the divorce. I pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. Let me make sure I understand this, I said. My former best friend gets my wife pregnant. I find out. My marriage ends. I lose the house we bought together. Half my furniture is still in storage because I haven't wanted to deal with it. My former best friend is now struggling with fatherhood. And somehow I am still the person you came to see. She started crying quietly, which was somehow worse. I know how it sounds. How does it sound to you? It sounds like I'm asking for too much. Then why are you asking? She pressed a hand over her mouth. Because that baby didn't do anything wrong. I agree completely. I leaned back. And I also have nothing to do with him. You were in her life for 6 years. And I found out in year 5 that the last 14 months of those 6 years included him. I kept my voice even. Not cold. Even, there's a difference though I'm not sure she heard it. I don't hold that against the baby. I genuinely don't. But I'm also not going to pretend that proximity makes me responsible. She looked at her hands. I just thought if you visited sometimes. Just to give her a break. No. She looked up. No, I said again. I'm not the backup plan for this situation. I'm the person that situation happened to. She left about 20 minutes later. Still holding the casserole. I hadn't taken it. That felt important somehow. Like, taking the shepherd's pie would have meant something I wasn't ready for it to mean. I stood at my window for a while after she left, watching the Bow River in the dark. Then I texted my sister, who lives in Inglewood, and is the only person in my life, who has never once suggested I consider the other side of this particular story. She called back in 4 minutes. She showed up with food, didn't she? My sister said. Shepherd's pie, son. Classic. She wants me to be around the baby. My sister was quiet for a second. Then, of course she does. I sat on the couch. What does that mean? It means if you step in, even a little bit, then what happens starts to look like a family problem instead of a betrayal. It becomes everyone came together. It becomes see, they worked it out. It stops being what it actually was. I stared at the ceiling. That was exactly it. My former mother-in-law wasn't trying to use me. She believed she was helping. But the effect was the same. If I showed up, the whole situation got softer. Easier to digest at Christmas dinner, easier to tell the neighbors. My former best friend's behavior became something that got absorbed, rather than something anyone had to face. She's going to try again, my sister said. Probably. Keep the casserole dish next time. At least get something out of it. 2 weeks later, my ex-wife's younger sister texted me. Her sister had always been decent to me. One of those people who existed in the middle of a situation without taking sides. Which is harder than it sounds. She said my ex-wife wanted to meet for coffee. Not to ask anything, just to talk. I sat on that text for 3 days. Meeting my ex-wife felt like agreeing to swim in a lake where you'd almost drowned. The water looked still, but your body remembered. Still, her sister had said she wanted to talk, not ask, and I'd learned from my therapist that sometimes avoiding a conversation just lets other people write the ending for you. I said yes. We met at a Tim Hortons on 17th Avenue on a Tuesday morning. She was already there when I arrived. She looked like someone who hadn't slept properly in 4 months, which she hadn't. No makeup. Hair, back. A stain on her sleeve that I recognized as the color of formula. She stood when she saw me coming through the door. Then she seemed to think standing was too much, and sat back down. Hi, she said. Hi. We sat. An employee was mopping the floor behind us, with something that smelled like industrial lemons. It was a perfectly ordinary Tuesday morning in Calgary, which means whatever you're carrying, the city will not acknowledge it. I heard my mom came to see you, she said. She did. When? She closed her eyes. I'm sorry. I studied her face. Did you ask her to? No, she said it fast firmly. No, I swear, I told her to leave you alone. You did? Where? She nodded. I've told her multiple times. She keeps saying she's just trying to help. I believed her. Not because she'd earned my trust back. That wasn't how trust worked, and we both knew it. But I believed her in that specific moment. Because the look of face was the particular exhaustion of someone fighting a battle on multiple fronts and losing all of them. She called me steady, I said. My ex-wife laughed, a short, sharp sound with no humor in it. She loves that word. She used to use it about me. I know. I'm sorry for that too. I looked out the window. A cyclist went by in an orange jacket. Calgary was thawing out, finally. There were patches of ice on the sidewalk. But the sun was doing something optimistic with the light. She's been talking to her friends, my ex-wife said. About you, about why you're not around. She pulled out her phone. Can I show you? I almost said no, then I nodded. She slid the phone across the table. It was a text thread between my former mother-in-law and someone she'd labeled Aunt Ruth. My former mother-in-law had written. He had 6 years with her. In my heart he still has a connection to that child. He's choosing to walk away because of pride. I read it twice. Pride. That was what she called it. The thing that happens when the person you wronged refuses to keep paying for it. There was another message, a different thread. He was there for most of the pregnancy not knowing, poor thing. But now that baby needs consistency and he's the best person for that. I don't understand why he won't see that. I set the phone down. She's telling people I abandoned him, I said. It wasn't a question. Not in those words. In those words exactly. My ex-wife took the phone back. I found out because Aunt Ruth called me and said she thought I should reach out to you. I nodded slowly. Where is he in all of this? She gave a tired exhale. That depends who you ask. If you ask my mom, he's overwhelmed and needs time. If you ask me, he's been adjusting for 4 months and still hasn't figured out how to assemble the stroller. Has he paid anything toward the baby? Some. Inconsistently. My mom has covered more than he has, but she tells people it came from him. I only know because I checked the transfers. I looked at my coffee cup. Of course she does. I'm not asking you to fix this, my ex-wife said quickly. I just thought you deserved to know what was being said about you. I looked at her for a long moment. Thank you, I said. I mean it. Her eyes filled. I'm trying to do better. For the baby, whatever that looks like. I nodded. I hope you do. I walked out into the April cold and felt something sharp and focused settle in my chest. Not anger exactly. More like clarity. My former mother-in-law was constructing a story. She needed me to have a role in it. And I was tired of other people deciding what my role was going to be. The family group chat was something I'd been removed from after the separation. Someone had been considerate enough to do that, at least. But my former mother-in-law apparently decided that was a solvable technical problem and added me back 3 weeks later. I stared at the notification like it was a wasp that had flown in through an open window. The first message I saw was from one of her sisters. We're thinking about all of you. Sending love. Then from a cousin I'd met twice at summer gatherings. That baby is so beautiful. Family shows up for family. Then from someone I couldn't immediately place. It takes a village. I did not respond. Then my former best friend wrote into the chat. He hadn't texted me directly in 7 months. He wrote, we all need to give this time and stop making things harder than they have to be. I sat with that for about 60 seconds. Harder than they have to be. From the person who had made them what they were. I thought about my therapist's distinction between reacting and responding. I thought about my sister saying the most effective thing you can do is tell the truth out loud. In front of witnesses. Then I opened my saved screenshots. I posted his text to my ex-wife from 3 months ago. I really didn't plan for this to be my life right now. I'm not built for the daily grind of parenting. You knew what kind of person I was when we started this. The group chat went completely silent. Then I posted his text to my former mother-in-law. Can't she get more help from her side? I can be there on weekends, but I can't restructure my whole life. Then I typed. I have not made anything harder. I removed myself from a situation that had nothing to do with me. You were all upset because I refused to stand in the space he left open. Nobody responded for almost 2 minutes. Then my ex-wife's sister wrote. I think everyone needs to step back from this. My former best friend replied, sharing private messages is low. I wrote back, positioning yourself as overwhelmed while leaving someone else to hold your consequences is lower. That ended the chat. At least for that day. But like all problems touched by people who haven't resolved anything, it didn't stay ended. It just got reorganized. My sister called the following morning. So I hear from Aunt Ruth, who apparently has my number now, through some chain of events I don't fully understand, that there's a get-together at the end of the month. Informal. For the baby. I wasn't invited. You were. My former mother-in-law told several people she really hoped you'd come. She said it would mean a lot. I leaned against my kitchen counter. And if I don't come, you're the one who couldn't let go of anger and abandoned an innocent child. And if I do, she engineers a moment. In front of everyone. I pinched the bridge of my nose. Same trap either way. Yes, my sister said, but if you come, you can bring your own. She meant my folder, which I had in fact been adding to for weeks. I didn't want to go. Every clear-headed part of me said stay home, order something, watch the flames, protect what you've quietly built. But I'd been letting my absence become a statement I'd never made. My former mother-in-law had been speaking on my behalf for months. I was done with that. So I went. It was a Saturday afternoon at her house in Airdrie. The kind of house, with a mudroom and a double garage and a vegetable garden that hadn't been started because it was still early spring and Alberta doesn't hurry for anyone. I drove out the Deerfoot and got there 11 minutes late on purpose. My sister was already in the driveway. She looked at the folder under my arm and said, "Good. Nice to see you too." Inside, I saw my ex-wife first. She was standing near the kitchen island, with the baby in a carrier against her chest. He was small. Dressed in a little striped outfit that looked almost impossibly small. She looked up when I came in and her face did something complicated. She mouthed, "I'm sorry." I gave a small nod. My former best friend was there, standing near the back door, looking at his phone. His own son was being held by someone else, and he was looking at his phone. I noticed that. I suspect a few other people did too. My former mother-in-law moved through the room, greeting relatives, with the energy of someone who had been planning this event carefully and was determined it would resolve in a particular direction. When she saw me, her face arranged itself into something that was meant to look like relief. "You came," she said, moving toward me with open arms. I stepped back, not dramatically, just enough. Her arms dropped, she recovered quickly. "It means so much, truly. I'm sure." People were watching. Of course they were. She lowered her voice. "I just want today to be peaceful." I looked at her. "Were you planning for it not to be?" She looked away. There it was. The afternoon moved the way those gatherings do. Food on the counter. Relatives catching up. Someone's kid running between people's legs. I stayed near the edges with my sister. My ex-wife kept her distance, which I appreciated. My former best friend had put his phone away, and was now standing near the baby with the body language of someone who knows they're being watched, and is performing accordingly. My former mother-in-law waited until there was a natural lull in the room's noise before she made her move. She walked over holding the baby. My ex-wife saw her coming and said quietly, "Mom, please." My former mother-in-law didn't stop. She came right to where I was standing, smiled with her eyes glassy, turned just enough that several people in the room could see clearly. "Would you like to hold him?" The room did that thing where nobody moved, but everybody shifted. My former best friend looked up from across the room. Aunt Ruth craned her neck. My sister's hand tightened slightly on her mug. My former mother-in-law held the baby out just enough. Not a full offer. A suggestion. The kind where refusal looks like something else entirely. It was a perfect trap. If I took him, she'd have what she came for, a moment, a photograph, a story about healing she could tell people for years. If I refused, I was the hard-hearted man in front of a room full of witnesses. I looked at the baby. He was awake, blinking at the light, with the vaguely philosophical expression of someone encountering existence for the first time and taking it seriously. He had done nothing. He would never do anything to deserve any of this. That was exactly why I had to say no. "No," I said, quietly, clearly. Her smile rearranged itself rather than fell. "He's very calm today." "No." I looked at her directly. "You don't get to use him as a prop." Someone near the back of the room made a sound. My ex-wife said, "Oh God," under her breath. My former mother-in-law's voice shifted to something soft and wounded. "How can you be so cold? In front of everyone." "In front of everyone?" I said. "You planned for everyone to be here. That's fine. Then everyone can hear this." I set my folder on the counter, beside the vegetable tray. My former best friend took a step forward. "Don't." I looked at him. "Don't what?" "Don't tell the truth in front of the people you've been feeding a different truth to, for months?" His face went hard. I opened the folder. "This is your text to my ex-wife saying you are not built for the daily grind of parenting." I set it on the counter. "This is your text to this woman." I indicated my former mother-in-law, asking why my ex-wife couldn't get more support from her own family. I placed that beside the first. "And this is you, 3 months ago, writing to a mutual friend." Honestly, if she'd stayed with her husband, all of this would be easier. He was always better at handling things than me. The room was completely quiet. Aunt Ruth looked at my former best friend. "Did you write that?" He said nothing. My former mother-in-law held the baby very close. Her face had gone pale. "I was only trying to make sure he had love." "You were trying to make sure he had a father without making his father do the work of being one." I kept my voice even, not loud, even. "And you've been telling people I abandoned him to make that easier to explain." "I didn't abandon him. He doesn't know I exist." "He never did." My ex-wife stepped forward. She said my name first, just my name, quietly, and then, "He's right." She used my actual name. Not a version of it, not the nickname she'd sometimes shortened it to. My name, said plainly, in a room full of people who had been hearing a different version of me for months. "I made this mess," she said. Her voice was quiet enough that the room had to settle to hear it. "I made it, not him. He didn't abandon this baby. He was never this baby's father. And I'm not going to keep letting anyone use my son to rewrite what actually happened." My former mother-in-law turned toward her. "Sweetheart. Give him to me, Mom." She held out her arms. "Please." A long pause. Then my former mother-in-law handed the baby over. My ex-wife held him against her chest, pressed her face to the top of his head for a moment, and then looked at the room. The person who needs to step up is right there. She looked at my former best friend with a directness I hadn't seen from her in a very long time. And if he doesn't, I'll be going through the maintenance enforcement program by the end of the month. I've already spoken to a lawyer. My former best friend looked around the room. The way people look when they realize no one is coming to save them. Then he did the thing I'd watched him do in smaller ways across 12 years of friendship. Every confrontation, every overdue conversation, every moment where something was asked of him that he hadn't planned for, he left. He said something about needing air. And walked out the back door into the Airdrie afternoon. And his son was still in the room when he did it. The silence he left was heavy and specific. My sister came to stand beside me, not dramatically, just beside me, in the way people who actually have your back do it, without announcement. My former mother-in-law sat down slowly, like her knees had decided something independently. Aunt Ruth put a hand on her shoulder. Nobody in the room was looking at me the way they had been 10 minutes ago. A few people were looking at me the way you look at someone who has just said something difficult and true, which is different. I picked up my folder. My former mother-in-law said very quietly, "He could have loved you. Eventually." That one landed differently. Not entirely because it was manipulative. It was partly, but because it might also have been true. In some other version of everything. In a world where the 14 months had gone differently. Where my former best friend had been someone other than who he was. Where my wife had made different choices, maybe. But a version that didn't happen is not a debt you owe the version that did. I looked at the baby in my ex-wife's arms. He was fussing slightly, turning his face toward her shoulder, just doing what babies do, entirely unbothered by the adults around him, which was the right call. He deserves love, I said, and he deserves honesty. And the truth is that his father just walked out the back door, and every person in this room is still looking at me. Nobody spoke. I looked at my former mother-in-law. Stop telling people I walked away from him. I was never walking beside him. That's different. I said goodbye to my sister at the door. She said, "You okay?" I thought about it honestly. Not yet. But I think I'm getting somewhere. I meant that. After the afternoon in Airdrie, something shifted. Not quickly, not cleanly. The way people summarize things in stories, when they want to skip the part that actually takes the longest. Real change doesn't have good timing. It arrives at inconvenient moments, and asks you to keep showing up to it without an audience. But something shifted. Aunt Ruth called me the following week, and gave me an apology that was an actual apology. The kind that didn't have a but buried somewhere inside it. My ex-wife's cousin sent a message that just said, "I was told the wrong version for a while. I'm sorry." My ex-wife's sister texted to say she was glad I came. My ex-wife sent a message through her sister a few weeks later. A few lines. She said, "I should have said louder and earlier that this was never your responsibility. I'm sorry I didn't." I read it several times. Then I replied, "I hope he grows up in something stable and honest." I meant it. Both parts. My former best friend ended up going through the maintenance enforcement program. My ex-wife had meant it about the lawyer. He was ordered to pay a fixed monthly amount through the MEP. Whether he paid it consistently or under constant complaint was something I heard about secondhand and didn't need to follow closely. It was no longer my geometry. My former mother-in-law sent a card to my condo 2 months after the gathering. A physical card with a stamp, because she'd apparently figured out that physical mail goes around the systems people put in place. I opened it over the kitchen counter, prepared to set it down quickly if I needed to. It was 3 pages in her handwriting. She said she loved me like a son. She said she'd made mistakes. She said the baby would have been lucky to have me in his life. And she still believed there was a place for kindness in all of this. And at the bottom she wrote, "I still think it would mean so much if you came by once. Not as his father. Just as someone who cared." I put the card back in the envelope. On the front I wrote, "This is not an apology. This is another invitation to the same gathering." I mailed it back. Some people will call that petty. I slept fine. There is a difference between being at peace with yourself and being at peace with everyone around you. And in that period of my life, the first one was the only kind I had access to. I was done apologizing for that. Life moved forward in the way it does when you stop fighting it and start actually living in it. I kept going to therapy. I got a small raise at work. I started running along the Elbow River path in the evenings when the weather cooperated. I kept the fern alive for another few months, before it finally gave out, and I decided to respect that as the fern's decision. My sister and I started watching a show together on Thursday evenings, which sounds like a small thing and is genuinely not. My ex-wife and I had no further direct contact. That was the right distance. My former best friend became a legal obligation in that baby's life, before he became anything else in it. Whether he'll become more, I don't know. I stopped tracking it. Do I think about that baby sometimes? Yes. More than I usually admit to anyone. I hope he grows up being told the truth in doses he can handle. I hope his mother keeps her word. I hope he figures out who his father is without that story becoming too heavy too early. I hope my former mother-in-law eventually learns the difference between love and arrangement. Between caring about someone and trying to turn them into a solution. I hope my former best friend becomes something more useful than what he's been. Mostly, I hope I keep becoming someone who can hold all of that hope and still understand clearly that none of it is mine to fix. Here is what I know now. On the other side of everything. Being the reliable one doesn't mean being the person who absorbs every consequence of someone else's choices. Being kind doesn't mean making yourself perpetually available to situations that have nothing to do with you and caring about an innocent child from a distance. Genuinely, honestly, without a role in his story, does not require walking back into the wreckage that hurt you. I didn't abandon that baby. The man who fathered him did. The only reason anyone kept looking at me when that happened is because I had spent years being the kind of person who showed up. I'm still that person. I just finally got to decide where.